The first shot came through the window as Thomas reached for his deed papers. Abigail saw the spray of red before she heard the scream, her own or Eleanor's. She couldn't tell. She clutched her 7-year-old daughter to her chest and dove behind the table as boots thundered onto their porch. "Run!" Thomas gasped, blood bubbling at his lips, pressing something into her hand. "Don't let them find you. Don't let them find what he's after." Judge Holbrook stepped through the doorway, flanked by men with badges that gleamed like false promises in the lamplight. "Shame," he said, nudging Thomas with his polished boot. "Man should know when to surrender what isn't rightfully his." That night, Abigail and Eleanor disappeared into the wilderness, carrying only grief and a secret worth killing for, never imagining that the man who would eventually pull them from darkness would be the one they'd beg to leave them in it. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. The prairie that afternoon stretched wide as parchment unrolled, heat shimmering in waves that distorted the horizon. Hope Blackwood rode slow, his horse Calico picking her way through Arizona Territory's unforgiving scrubland. The leather of his saddle creaked beneath him, punctuating the vast silence of 1885's untamed West. 8 years had passed since Hope lost his wife Sarah during childbirth, their son following her 3 days later. Those years had carved him hollow, whittled him down to bare essentials, few words, fewer connections, a life of quiet endurance. The Crescent Moon Ranch stood as both his fortress and his prison, a place where a man could forget he'd once hoped for more. He nearly missed it, that sound. Faint as a whisper, it might have been merely wind sighing through the abandoned mining camp he was passing. Hope reined Calico to a halt, head cocked, listening. There it came again, human voices rising from somewhere beneath the earth, following the sound. Hope dismounted and approached what remained of the old silver mine entrance, partially collapsed after the ore played out. From within came whispered words, desperate yet hushed. He crouched down, clearing debris until he could peer into the darkness below. 2 faces looked up at him. One belonged to a woman, perhaps 25, her features striking despite the dirt smudging her face. Beside her huddled a child no more than 7. Eyes wide as saucers in her small face. "Please," the woman whispered, clutching the girl tighter. "Don't pull us out. They already killed my daddy." The plea caught Hope off guard. Most trapped souls would beg for rescue, not continued confinement in darkness. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice rough from disuse. "Need water?" The woman shook her head, eyes darting past him to scan the horizon. Slowly, her story emerged. Her name was Abigail Monroe, the child her daughter Eleanor. Men had come to their homestead, men with badges that gave them authority but not right. Her husband Thomas had stood against Judge Samuel Holbrook when he tried to claim their land through falsified paperwork. They'd shot him where he stood and would have taken them too, had they not fled into the night. Hope recognized the truth in those frightened eyes. The desert would claim them sure as sunrise if they remained hidden. Whatever men hunted them wouldn't be far behind. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low but firm. "I've got a ranch, isolated, defensible. You can't stay here." "We can't," Abigail protested, her voice breaking. "They'll find us. They'll find you." Hope looked at Eleanor, noting the hollow of her cheeks and fear in her eyes. Something stirred in him that he thought had died with Sarah. "Let me worry about that," he said, lowering his rope. "The girl first." He didn't fully understand his own actions, But as he helped them from that hole in the earth, Hope Blackwood made a choice that would alter everything and challenge the corruption festering in this corner of the Arizona Territory. The threats began small but unmistakable. A dead coyote appeared at Hope's gate. Cattle were driven from their grazing land. Strange boot prints circled the property at night, like wolves testing boundaries. In Salvation, the poor excuse for a town that served the scattered ranches, conversations halted when Hope entered the mercantile for supplies. Owner Wilson leaned across his counter, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Heard you might have company out at your place." "Hope?" he said, measuring coffee beans. "Pretty widow and her girl?" Hope's face remained impassive. "My business is mine." Course, Wilson backpedaled. Well, Judge Holbrook's men were asking after a woman and child. Reward offered." "That so?" Wilson leaned closer. "They said she killed her husband, stole some valuable papers." The lie was transparent and dangerous, Holbrook laying groundwork to justify whatever he'd do when he found Abigail and Eleanor. Riding back, Hope noticed a rider shadowing him at a distance, watching but never approaching, a message being sent. They knew, or at least suspected. At the ranch, Hope found Abigail teaching Eleanor to card wool from his small flock. The domestic scene struck him as incongruous against the gathering storm. That evening, after Eleanor slept, Abigail joined Hope on the porch, wrapped in a shawl that had once belonged to Sarah. "Before we fled," she said quietly, "Thomas gave me something, papers proving that Judge Holbrook's been falsifying deeds, not just ours, but dozens of homesteaders. Thomas was working with a federal marshal to expose him." "Where are these papers now?" "Hidden," she replied. "Not here. I wouldn't risk that." Hope nodded, understanding better now the stakes and danger. This wasn't just about a spring or piece of land. It was about power, corruption, and what happened to those who challenged it. One morning, a solitary rider approached openly up the main trail, unusual for Holbrook's tactics. Hope took his rifle and stepped onto the porch. "Mr. Blackwood, my name is James Edwards, United States Marshal." Hope demanded his badge, which matched Abigail's description of Thomas's contact. Edwards explained he'd come about evidence against Holbrook. When Abigail emerged from the cabin, recognizing Edwards, Hope felt betrayal's sting. "You sent for him? Without telling me?" "I had to," she pleaded. "The papers Thomas died for, they need to reach the federal court." After tense discussion, they developed a plan. Edwards would leave openly to draw off watchers. Hope would take the documents, which Abigail retrieved from Eleanor's doll, through backcountry to Tucson. Abigail and Eleanor would remain at the defensible ranch. As Hope prepared to depart before dawn, Abigail pressed the documents into his hand, their fingers touching briefly. "Hope, thank you for everything." He left in darkness, taking a hidden trail through foothills, but 3 miles from the ranch, gunshots echoed across the valley. The ranch was under attack sooner than expected, leaving Hope torn between his mission and his desperate desire to protect those he'd promised to save. With the ranch under attack, Hope faced his first major conflict: continue to Tucson with the evidence or return to defend Abigail and Eleanor. After painful deliberation, he pushed forward, reasoning that the documents were what Holbrook truly wanted. "Abigail and Eleanor are only valuable to him alive," Hope told himself as he urged Calico over a ridge. "The defensive positions we prepared will hold until I return." For nearly 3 days, Hope rode relentlessly, taking trails so narrow and steep that Holbrook's men wouldn't consider them passable. He arrived in Tucson exhausted. clothes dust-caked, face sun-scorched. At the federal courthouse, he demanded to see Judge Harlan, causing such commotion that bailiffs nearly removed him before Edwards' name finally gained him entrance. Judge Harlan was a stern-faced man with piercing eyes that seemed to measure Hope's worth in seconds. These are documents proving land fraud and murder by Judge Samuel Holbrook of Cochise County, Hope said, placing an oilskin packet on the desk. Marshal Edwards was to bring them. He may be dead. The witnesses are under siege at my ranch. After reviewing the papers, Harlan authorized Marshal William Parker, a former Texas Ranger, to accompany Hope back with deputies. Parker understands frontier justice, Harlan explained. Meanwhile, at Crescent Moon Ranch, Abigail and Eleanor faced their own battle. When Holbrook's men attacked shortly after Hope's departure, they took refuge in the defensive positions Hope had prepared. Marshal Edwards returned unexpectedly with 3 deputies, helping to drive back the attackers, though Edwards himself was wounded in the process. Hope and Parker's team rode hard toward the ranch, pushing men and horses to their limits. When they finally arrived on the 5th day, Hope found evidence of battle, a damaged corral, partially burned barn, but the cabin still stood. Eleanor ran out to greet him, followed by Abigail, rifle cradled in her arms, her face drawn with exhaustion, but eyes brightening at his return. Inside, Edwards lay wounded, a bullet still lodged in his side. As Parker's men secured the perimeter, a rider approached under white flag, Frank, one of Holbrook's cowboys, carrying a message. Holbrook would forget everything if Abigail surrendered the papers and testified they were forgeries created by Thomas. Otherwise, 30 men would attack at dawn. Hope suggested Abigail and Eleanor leave with some of Parker's men for Fort Bowie. She refused firmly. "No, we've fought this far together. I won't run now." Through the night, they prepared defenses, digging rifle pits, erecting barricades, setting traps, preparing a controlled burn for a smoke screen at dawn. In a quiet moment, Hope told Abigail about an escape route behind the North Ridge. "Promise me you'll take Eleanor and go if things turn bad." Abigail's response revealed her transformation. "I've spent so much time running, from Holbrook, from the memory of watching Thomas die, even from the possibility of caring for someone new." Her eyes met his. "I don't want to run anymore." An understanding passed between them that transcended words, 2 people prepared to stand together against overwhelming odds, not just for survival, but for justice against the corruption poisoning the territory. As the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky, they took their positions, waiting for what daylight would bring. Dawn broke with Holbrook's men materializing from morning mist. 28 riders spreading to encircle the ranch. Judge Holbrook himself rode at their center, flanked by Sheriff Denton, their confidence evident in their approach. Frank rode forward as spokesman. "What's your answer?" "Blackwood?" After strategic silence, Marshal Parker called from his hidden position. "Samuel Holbrook, this is U.S. Marshal William Parker." Confusion rippled through Holbrook's men. This wasn't the desperate resistance they expected. After brief exchange, Holbrook raised his arm, the signal to attack. Chaos erupted as carefully laid traps sprung. Hidden ropes snapped taut across trails, sending horses and riders tumbling. The controlled burn billowed smoke across the eastern approach, creating confusion. Parker's men opened disciplined fire from concealed positions, targeting horses rather than riders when possible. From his position on the cabin roof, Hope targeted Holbrook directly. His first shot took the judge's hat off. The second creased his mount's ear, causing it to rear and throw him. As Holbrook scrambled for cover, Drawing his pistol, the cabin door opened and Abigail stepped out, Edward's revolver steady in her hands. "Samuel Holbrook," she said with quiet intensity. "This is for Thomas." Her shot caught Holbrook in the shoulder, spinning him half around. Hope followed with a bullet to his leg. Holbrook collapsed, clutching the wound, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. Denton killed them all. But Sheriff Denton was already surrendering to Parker, having seen the tide turn against them, one by one. Holbrook's men threw down weapons or fled, abandoning their wounded employer. Hope and Abigail rushed to check on Eleanor, finding her safe in the root cellar where they'd hidden her. As they emerged with the child, Parker approached with news. "We need to move the wounded to town, and Holbrook straight to Tucson. Can't risk leaving him here with too many friends." As wagons departed with wounded and prisoners, an unusual quiet settled over the ranch. The three stood surveying the damage, exhausted but alive. That evening, as Eleanor slept, Abigail confessed to Hope by the fire, "I keep seeing his face, not Holbrook's, Thomas's, the moment he realized they were going to kill him." She closed her eyes briefly. "I didn't think I could pull that trigger today, but when I saw Holbrook, all I felt was clarity." "You did what you had to do," Hope said. "We all did." "And now?" she asked, her eyes meeting his. "What happens now? Hope?" The question carried meaning beyond immediate plans. Hope, who for years defined his life by emptiness, now faced possibilities he hadn't imagined. "Now we rebuild," he said simply. "One day at a time." "Is that an invitation to stay?" Abigail asked. "If you want it to be." Hope spent that night on the porch, rifle across his knees, watching stars wheel overhead. The dangers weren't all past. Holbrook had friends, and revenge was powerful motivation. But for the first time in years, Hope felt something like peace. Whatever came next, it would not find him alone. 2 weeks after the battle, a military detachment from Fort Bowie brought official notice. The trial of Judge Holbrook and Sheriff Denton would begin in Tucson in 1 month. Abigail was formally summoned as witness for the prosecution. "I have to go," she said that evening. "I owe it to Thomas." "We'll all go," Hope replied without hesitation. Their journey to Tucson was arduous but uneventful. The city overwhelmed Abigail with its bustle after weeks at the isolated ranch. She stayed close to Hope's side as they navigated crowded streets. The trial became a sensation. With citizens packing the courthouse, Holbrook secured expensive lawyers who objected to every piece of evidence and questioned every witness's credibility. When Abigail took the stand, Hope sat in the front row with Eleanor. Holbrook watched Abigail with calculated menace as she recounted events leading to Thomas's murder. During cross-examination, Holbrook's lawyer attacked her character. "Rather than report this alleged murder to authorities, you fled with your daughter, eventually taking up residence with Mr. Blackwood, unmarried and unchaperoned. Is that correct?" Abigail responded with dignity. "I fled because the sheriff was part of the conspiracy, and Mr. Blackwood saved our lives." Outside the courthouse, Marshal Parker brought troubling news. Frank, their key witness who turned against Holbrook, had been found dead, apparent suicide with a suspicious note confessing he'd lied about everything. Judge Harlan had been removed from the case, with a new judge arriving from Phoenix that night. As they discussed these developments in Hope's room at the boarding house, Parker arrived with devastating news. Fire at the courthouse, all the evidence. The courthouse was burning, starting in the evidence room. Additionally, 2 of Parker's deputies had been attacked, one killed, Parker urged them to flee immediately for Fort Bowie, explaining that without evidence and with witnesses disappearing, the case was collapsing. The new judge would likely dismiss charges tomorrow. Hope made a fateful decision. Take Eleanor to Fort Bowie. You'll be safe there. And you? Abigail asked. Fear evident. I'm going to finish this, Hope declared. Before departing with Parker and Eleanor, Abigail embraced Hope and kissed him briefly but meaningfully. I lost one good man to Holbrook's evil. I won't lose another. That night, Hope infiltrated Holbrook's hotel suite. Overhearing the judge plotting with an associate to hunt down and kill all three of them, regardless of the trial's outcome, Hope revealed himself. Revolver leveled at Holbrook, who recovered from surprise to calculating arrogance. So, what now? You shoot me in cold blood? Become the murderer they accused me of being? Hope's finger tightened on the trigger as he faced his moral test. Would killing Holbrook make him no better than the corrupt judge? You're not worth my soul, Holbrook, Hope decided, lowering his gun slightly. Before Holbrook could gloat, Marshal Parker burst in with federal marshals. Samuel Holbrook, you're under arrest for the murder of Deputy Marshal James Collins. Parker had created a new charge falling under federal jurisdiction, bypassing Holbrook's corrupt local influence. When Holbrook lunged for a weapon, Hope knocked him unconscious. I couldn't do it, Hope admitted afterward. Good, Parker replied simply. He's not worth it. With Holbrook in federal custody, Hope took the morning stage to Fort Bowie, a newfound lightness in his spirit. The harsh Arizona landscape rolled past, beautiful in its untamed state. Much like the future that now seemed possible. At Fort Bowie, Eleanor rushed to him the moment he appeared, while Abigail stood back, eyes bright with unshed tears. You came back, she said simply. I promised I would. That evening, after Eleanor slept, Hope and Abigail walked along the fort's perimeter under starlight. She told him she was proud he didn't kill Holbrook. I'm glad, not for his sake, but for yours. Hope explained that with the new federal charges engineered by Parker's clever strategy, Holbrook's corrupt friends could no longer protect him. The conversation turned to what would come next. And us. The ranch? Abigail asked, her voice careful. Hope took a deep breath, expressing feelings he'd guarded for weeks. I know it hasn't been long since Thomas. I know your heart still belongs to him in many ways, but if you and Eleanor wanted to come back to Crescent Moon, if you wanted to make it a home, Hope Blackwood, are you asking me to stay with you? She asked directly. Yes, he replied, for as long as you want to. And if I said I wanted forever? The question hung between them, full of possibility. Hope's answer came without hesitation. Then I'd say yes to that too. Abigail stepped closer, her face tilted up to his in the starlight. Eleanor needs a father, and I need you. Their decision to build a life together represented resolution to immediate dangers they'd faced, though Hope knew the territory was still healing from corruption's wounds. Some homesteaders who lost land to Holbrook's schemes were beginning to return, reclaiming properties with the help of federal authorities. Justice was slowly being restored. Marshal Parker visited before they left Fort Bowie, bringing news of Holbrook's case proceeding well in federal court. He surprised Hope with an unexpected question. Ever consider a badge? Hope almost laughed. Not my calling. Seems to me standing for what's right is exactly your calling, Parker observed. Looking toward Abigail and Eleanor in the distance, Hope shook his head, but the words settled somewhere deep. He'd never sought to be anyone's champion or defender. He'd only wanted peace after losing Sarah. Yet when confronted with injustice, he hadn't been able to look away, hadn't been able to ride past that mine shaft when voices called from below. As Parker departed, Hope watched him go with newfound respect for the law, not as practiced by corrupt men like Holbrook and Denton, but as embodied by men of principle like Parker and Edwards. Perhaps there was hope for the territory after all, just as there had been hope for a lonely rancher who'd found purpose in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. 3 months later, Crescent Moon Ranch stood transformed. Battle damage had been repaired, buildings repainted, new livestock acquired. Hope had expanded the cabin, adding a proper bedroom for Eleanor and allowing Abigail to add touches that made the house a home. They married in a simple ceremony performed by an army chaplain from Fort Bowie. Eleanor served as their only attendant, her face glowing with happiness as she watched them exchange vows. Marshal Parker stood as Hope's witness, having ridden 2 days from Tucson to attend. News had arrived that Holbrook's federal trial progressed well, with evidence being meticulously reconstructed by prosecutors determined to see justice done throughout the territory. Effects of his downfall rippled outward as corruption was exposed and addressed, creating opportunity for honest settlers to thrive. Eleanor now called Hope Pa, a word that still stopped his heart momentarily when he heard it. She had blossomed in their home's security, her nightmares gradually replaced by dreams. Hope and Abigail learned each other day by day, their relationship deepening through shared work, quiet evenings, and mutual respect. On a warm evening in late summer, Hope sat on the porch watching sunset paint the desert gold and crimson. Eleanor played in the yard with a puppy, her laughter carrying on still air. Abigail joined Hope, placing hands on his shoulders. "Penny for your thoughts," she said. "Just thinking about that day in the mine shaft," he replied, "how close I came to riding past." "But you didn't," she reminded him, leaning down. "You heard us." "Best decision I ever made," Hope acknowledged, "pulling you out of that darkness. Even though we begged you not to." There was gentle teasing in her voice. "Especially then," he answered. "Sometimes the things we fear most are the very things that save us." Eleanor called to them, eager to show her puppy's new trick. As Abigail joined her, Hope remained on the porch a moment longer, watching his family in fading light. The desert stretched vast around them, Dragoon Mountains silhouetted against darkening sky. This land that once seemed so empty now felt full of promise. Whatever challenges might come, whatever shadows from the past might resurface, they would face them together. Hope rose and walked toward them, toward home, completing his journey from a man hollowed by loss to one renewed by love, courage, and the choice to stand for what's right. The title, "Please Don't Pull Us Out, They Already Killed My Daddy," now carried deeper meaning. It represented not just the desperate plea that began their story, but the paradox that sometimes salvation comes through doing exactly what we fear, and that the darkest moments can lead to unexpected light. In the vast expanses of the American West, justice was often as scarce as water in the desert. Yet even in those harsh landscapes, courage could bloom like unexpected wildflowers after rain. This story reminds us that sometimes our greatest acts of bravery aren't grand gestures, but simple choices, stopping to listen when others would ride past, offering shelter when it might bring danger, standing firm when retreat seems wiser. The wounds of loss can hollow us, but they also create space for new beginnings. There is profound truth in the paradox that what we most fear, connection, vulnerability, standing against injustice, often becomes our salvation. even when corruption seems too deeply rooted to challenge. One person's refusal to look away can spark change that ripples outward, healing not just individual lives, but entire communities. Perhaps that's the most powerful message here, that healing and justice aren't solitary pursuits. They require us to reach beyond our own pain, to recognize another's, to extend a hand, even when it might cost us everything we've built. Thank you for joining us for this journey through darkness into light. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and follow our channel for more tales of courage, redemption, and the unbreakable human spirit.